it is then brought to the sugar boiler to be finished. The process is simple; it only requires attention in skimming and keeping the mass from boiling over, till it has arrived at the sugaring point, which is ascertained by dropping a little into cold water. When it is near the proper consistency, the kettle or pot becomes full of yellow froth that dimples and rises in large bubbles from beneath. These throw off puffs of steam, and when the molasses is in this stage, it is nearly converted into sugar. Those who pay great attention to keeping the liquid free from scum, and understand the precise sugaring point, will produce an article little if at all inferior to muscovado. Note. Good, well made maple sugar bears a strong resemblance to that called powdered sugar candy, sold by all grocers as a delicate article to sweeten coffee. It is more like maple sugar in its regular crystallizations. In general, you will see the maple sugar in large cakes, like beeswax, close and compact, without showing the crystallization; but it looks more beautiful when the grain is coarse and sparkling, and the sugar is broken in rough masses like sugar candy. The sugar is rolled or scraped down with a knife for use, as it takes long to dissolve in the tea without this preparation. I superintended the last part of the process, that of boiling the molasses down to sugar; and considering it was a first attempt, and without any experienced person to direct me, otherwise than the information I obtained from , I succeeded tolerably well, and produced some sugar of a fine sparkling grain and good colour. Besides the sugar, I made about 3 gallons of molasses, which proved a great comfort to us, forming a nice ingredient in cakes, and an excellent sauce for puddings. The Yankees, I am told, make excellent preserves with molasses instead of sugar. The molasses, boiled from maple sap, is very different from the molasses of the West Indies, both in flavour, colour, and consistency. Beside the sugar and molasses, we manufactured a small cask of vinegar, which promises to be good. This was done by boiling 5 pailfuls of sap down to 2, and fermenting it after it was in the vessel with barm. It was placed then near the fire, and suffered to continue there in preference to being exposed to the sun's heat. With regard to the expediency of making maple sugar, it depends on circumstances whether it be profitable or not to the farmer. If he have to hire hands for the work and pay high wages, it certainly does not answer to make it, unless on a large scale. One thing in its favour is, that the sugar season commences at a time when little else can be done on the farm, with the exception of chopping, the frost not being sufficiently out of the ground to admit of crops being sown. Time is, therefore, less valuable than it is later in the spring. Where there is a large family of children, and a convenient sugar bush on the lot, the making of sugar and molasses is decidedly a saving, as young children can be employed in emptying the troughs and collecting firewood. The bigger ones can tend the kettles, and keep up the fire while the sap is boiling, and the wife and daughters can finish off the sugar within doors. Maple sugar sells for 4d. and 6d. per pound, and sometimes for more. At first I did not particularly relish the flavour it gave to tea, but after a while I liked it far better than the muscovado, and as a sweetmeat it is to my taste delicious. I shall send you a specimen by the first opportunity, that you may judge for yourself of its excellence. The weather is now very warm, oppressively so; we can scarcely endure the heat of the cooking stove in the kitchen. As to a fire in the parlour, there is not much need of it, as I am glad to sit at the open door and enjoy the lake breeze. The insects are already beginning to be troublesome, particularly the black flies, a wicked looking fly, with black body and white legs and wings. You do not feel their bite for a few minutes, but are made aware of it by a stream of blood flowing from the wound. After a few hours the part swells and becomes extremely painful. These beasties chiefly delight in biting the sides of the throat, ears, and sides of the cheek, and with me the swelling continues for many days. The mosquitoes are also very annoying. I care more for the noise they make even than their sting. To keep them out of the house, we light little heaps of damp chips, the smoke of which drives them away; but this remedy is not entirely effectual, and is of itself rather an annoyance. This is the fishing season. Our lakes are famous for masquinonge, salmon trout, white fish, black bass, and many others. We often see the lighted canoes of the fishermen pass and repass of a dark night before our door. S is considered very skilful as a spearsman, and enjoys the sport so much that he seldom misses a night favourable for it. The darker the night and the calmer the water, the better it is for the fishing. It is a very pretty sight to see these little barks slowly stealing from some cove of the dark pine clad shores, and manoeuvring among the islands on the lakes, rendered visible in the darkness by the blaze of light cast on the water from the jack, a sort of open grated iron basket, fixed to a long pole at the bows of the skiff or canoe. This is filled with a very combustible substance called fat pine, which burns with a fierce and rapid flame, or else with rolls of birch bark, which is also very easily ignited. The light from above renders objects distinctly visible below the surface of the water. One person stands up in the middle of the boat with this fish spear, a sort of iron trident, ready to strike at the fish that he may chance to see gliding in the still waters, while another with his paddle steers the canoe cautiously along. This sport requires a quick eye, a steady hand, and great caution in those that pursue it. I delight in watching these torch lighted canoes so quietly gliding over the calm waters, which are illuminated for yards with a bright track of light, by which we may distinctly perceive the figure of the spearsman standing in the centre of the boat, first glancing to one side, then the other, or poising his weapon ready for a blow. When 4 or 5 of these lighted vessels are seen at once on the fishing ground, the effect is striking and splendid. The Indians are very expert in this kind of fishing, the squaws paddling the canoes with admirable skill and dexterity. There is another mode of fishing in which these people also excel. This is fishing on the ice when the lakes are frozen over, a sport that requires the exercise of great patience. The Indian, provided with his tomahawk, with which he makes an opening in the ice, a spear, his blanket, and a decoy fish of wood, proceeds to the place he has fixed upon. Having cut a hole in the ice, he places himself on hands and knees, and casts his blanket over him so as to darken the water and conceal himself from observation. In this position he will remain for hours, patiently watching the approach of his prey, which he strikes with admirable precision as soon as it appears within the reach of his spear. The masquinonge thus caught are superior in flavour to those taken later in the season, and may be bought very reasonably from the Indians. I gave a small loaf of bread for a fish weighing from 18 to 20 pounds. The masquinonge is to all appearance a large species of the pike, and possesses the ravenous propensities of that fish. One of the small lakes of the Otanabee is called Trout Lake, from the abundance of salmon trout that occupy its waters. The white fish is also found in these lakes, and is very delicious. The large sorts of fish are mostly taken with the spear, few persons having time for angling in this busy country. As soon as the ice breaks up, our lakes are visited by innumerable flights of wild fowl. Some of the ducks are extremely beautiful in their plumage, and are very fine flavoured. I love to watch these pretty creatures floating so tranquilly on the water, or suddenly rising and skimming along the edge of the pine fringed shores, to drop again on the surface, and then remain stationary, like a little fleet at anchor. Sometimes we see an old duck lead out a brood of little ones from among the rushes. The innocent, soft things look very pretty, sailing around their mother, but at the least appearance of danger they disappear instantly by diving. The frogs are great enemies to the young broods. They are also the prey of